The jury in Donald Trump's criminal hush money trial in New York is set to deliberate in the coming days. There was one revelation from that trial confirming something that was incredible that happened during the 2016 election. Trump's fixer, an attorney at the time, was working with a tabloid magazine and its king to pump out negative stories targeting his Republican opponents. Under oath, we heard from David Pecker. He was the first witness, the former publisher of the National Enquirer, who said that Michael Cohen would call and say, "We would like for you to run a negative article on, let's say for argument's sake, Ted Cruz." Then he would send me, he being Michael Cohen, send me information about Ted Cruz or Ben Carson or Marco Rubio. That was the basis of our story, and then we would embellish it from there. That means that Senator Ted Cruz was right when he said this as a candidate in 2016.
The National Enquirer. The CEO of the National Enquirer is an individual named David Pecker. Well, David is good friends with Donald Trump. They have a friendship that goes back for many years. This has no business in politics. This doesn't belong. Years from now, when my daughters Google this, they will read these lies, these attacks that Donald and his henchmen and his buddies at the National Enquirer spread.
And Senator Ted Cruz is back with me now. Do you feel vindicated when you have heard this testimony now?
Well, listen, I think it was obvious it was a lie then, and it's obvious it was a lie now. Now, I don't know that anyone ever thought the National Enquirer was a reliable news source. I'm not sure aliens arrived yesterday. I'm not sure Elvis is living in Des Moines. And so when they wrote the story, it was absurd. Now I will say, you know, the National Enquirer wrote that my father killed JFK.
Mm-hmm. And he said they mashed two photos together to create.
Yeah, they created a fake photo, and I will say my dad was pretty pissed. And although he laughed about it, but he was still like, what do I do? And I just said, look, Dad, it'll be fine. I will tell you the best response to that happened shortly thereafter. Marco Rubio at the Senate Republican lunch, he actually stood up and told all our colleagues, he said, look, I can tell you for a fact, there is no way that Ted's dad killed JFK. Because if a Cuban had done that, he would have told everyone. And, you know, that was Marco's defense, and there's a lot of truth to that.
But when you hear that, I mean, he said he directly tied it to you gaining popularity in the polls. I mean, do you feel like that hurt? People do read that at supermarkets. Yeah. Do you feel like it hurt your campaign?
It was a rough and tumble race. It was, I will say, Donald Trump and I have a different relationship than most people in Washington, because in 2016, I fought him repeatedly. I beat him over and over and over again in 12 states, but he ultimately prevailed. He beat me.
Yeah, he lied when you beat him the first time in Iowa.
And, you know, when he became president, I had a choice to make. I could be pissed. I could be pissed off at what he'd done. But if I was going to do that, he'd just been elected president. I got a job. I got a job to represent 30 million Texans. And frankly, if I was going to let my hurt feelings make me say, I'm not going to work with you, I needed to be prepared to resign my job and go home. And I made a decision then. I said, listen, I'm going to go represent 30 million Texans. I'm going to fight. I got on a plane. I flew to Trump Tower. I sat down with him, spent 4.5 hours. This is the week after the general election in 2016. And what I told him then, I said, Mr. President, we have an historic situation. The voters have given us control of the White House and both houses of Congress. We can't waste this. And I told him then, I said, listen, I want to roll up my sleeves and go to work and lead the effort to deliver on our promises. And as I look back to the Trump presidency, I think we accomplished incredible victories for the American people.
But this moment, what you said there, you know, you talked about your family. They targeted not just your dad, but also your wife. And I think a lot of people sitting at home would say, well, that's pretty cynical. I mean, this is someone who attacked your own members of your family. And what we learned from this testimony is that not only did Donald Trump know about it, he coordinated it.
Look, I understand, but I knew then it was lies. It was lies then. It's lies now.
But you didn't know Donald Trump himself was coordinating it.
Of course I did. I said he did. It was obvious. And at the end of the day, I'm a big boy. And as I said, I could have made a choice. Listen, if I were a private citizen, I could decide my feelings are hurt and I'm just going to leave. But if I do that, I can't do my job. And I care about my job. And I will say, if you look at the people of Texas, under almost any measure, the people of Texas were much, much better when Trump was president than compared to now. You look at, we passed an historic tax cut. I worked very hard with him on that. It produced incredible economic prosperity. We had the lowest unemployment rate in 50 years.
But do you think of the tactics that he used to get where he was?
I don't like him. I can't stand him.
Do you think he would have been the nominee had he not done stuff like that?
I don't know. I think Donald Trump is a unique character in American history. There are things he says and does that I like. There are things he says and does that I don't like. I'll tell you what millions of Americans love about him is that he's got backbones and guts, and that he's willing to stand and fight, and that matters.
And we talk to voters all the time about this, but at the time, I mean, it was 8 years ago, but it wasn't that long ago. You were both adults then, and you said that Trump didn't know the difference between truth and lies, that he lies practically every word that comes out of his mouth, and you said it was straight out of a psychology textbook, that his response to an accusation is to accuse everyone else of lying. I mean, do you feel differently now? Despite working together?
He says all sorts of things I wish he didn't say. I value civility in politics. I think we should treat each other with respect, even if we disagree with each other. I can't control what other people say. I can't control what other Republicans say. I can't control what other Democrats say. I can say that the people of Texas were a lot better when the border was secure. And under Donald Trump, we had the most secure border, the lowest rate of illegal immigration in 45 years than they are right now with an invasion at our southern border.
We talked about immigration last night. We had Senator James Lankford on the program. Obviously, he crafted the bill that Trump sank that would have helped with a lot of those problems, according to James Lankford.
It was a terrible bill.
Well, James Lankford disagreed. We talked about that criticism.
Well, he's going to vote no on it tomorrow.
On Nikki Haley and what you heard from her. Yeah, we talked about that. What you heard from her tonight saying that she will vote for Donald Trump. Do you empathize with her? She's in a similar position to you.
Look, I understand that journey, and I was in that position. Now, she didn't win any states, but she was the last person standing. I understand, and she was in a hard-fought primary. I have been in that spot, and it took some time for me to decide what to do. And I did not initially endorse Donald Trump. And as I thought about it, I wrestled with it. I wrote a long two-page essay that ultimately explained when I did endorse Trump. And I said at the time, I said, listen, I'm not sure what Trump will do in office. I don't know if he'll be a conservative or not. But I know what Hillary's promising to do. And what she's promising to do, I think, would be really harmful. And so I'm going to make the decision to go with someone who is saying he will do good things. And I'm going to do everything I can to help encourage him to do good things.
We've seen this argument. I mean, we've had Bill Barr was sitting in that seat, and he said he's voting for Donald Trump, even though he said Donald Trump can't get his policies accomplished. He said Donald Trump basically gets in his own way. But I do want to ask about the election. You were the first senator to object to the votes. Mm-hmm. In 2024, will you certify the election results? Do you plan to object, or will you accept the results regardless of who wins the election?
So, Kaitlan, I got to say, I think that's actually a ridiculous question.
It's a yes or no question, though.
No, it's not. Let me explain why it's a ridiculous question. It's not a question. Have you ever asked a Democrat that?
Of course.
What Democrat?
But what Democrats?
Hold on a second. What Democrats challenge it?
What Democrats? I know. I've been down this road many times.
But
no Democrat. You cannot compare the two situations. We have talked about that. We've seen the audio of that when they protested on the Senate floor.
But hold on a second.
But has you ever had a sitting president who refused to facilitate the peaceful transition of power, refused to acknowledge that his successor won the presidency?
So, A, we did have a peaceful transfer of power. I was there on January 20th. I was there on the swearing in.
Barely.
B, if you look at in 2000, Democrats went to the Senate, or 2001, Democrats went to the Senate floor and objected to George W. Bush. In 2004, they went and objected.
And what did the president do?
In 2016, Democrats went and objected to Donald Trump. And so... Look,
and what happened in 2016? Because I remember a guy named Joe Biden was vice president, and he went to the Senate floor and certified the votes.
So do you want...
Am I wrong?
So you're asking, will you promise no matter what to agree an election is illegitimate regardless of what happens? And that would be an absurd thing to claim. Like, we have an entire election law system that people challenge elections. Elections get overturned. Voter fraud gets proven. That happens all the time. And the media engages in this weird game post-Donald Trump that you insist no voter fraud has ever existed. Why does every state have laws in place to challenge voter fraud if it occurs?
The media
Why do you have election challenges?
This isn't a game. There was no widespread voter fraud.
You only ask Republicans that.
Because it was Republicans who tried to block the transition of power. You have to acknowledge that.
So
we've never seen it on a scale of what happened in 2020, and we've never seen the president refuse. He wouldn't even let Joe Biden get classified briefings at the beginning. I recall that. So my question for you again, free and fair election, will you accept the results regardless of who wins?
Look, if the Democrats win, I will accept the result, but I'm not going to ignore fraud regardless of what happens.
But was there fraud in 2020?
Of course there was fraud in
No,
2020.
there wasn't, and you still objected.
Oh, you know for a fact there was zero voter fraud. Really? What's your basis for that? Show me your evidence.
We've spoken with Governor Kemp. They did 3 hand recounts in the state of Georgia. The director of CISA said that it was the safest, most legitimate election.
But
in
you're
United
saying
States
zero voter
history.
fraud occurred. That's what you just said.
Nothing that would have changed the outcome
Okay,
of that
but that's a
election.
different statement.
But no, it's not, because if
yes,
it wouldn't
it
have
is.
changed
You said there was no voter fraud.
there was no voter fraud that would have changed the outcome of the election, and you know that, Senator.
So what I know is that what I stood on the Senate floor and objected, what I called for, I'll tell you, I wrestled with what to do in that circumstance. And the reason I wrestled with it is because I think there was significant voter fraud in 2020. And
you wanted the 10-day commission, I know, but was there voter fraud that would have changed the outcome of the election?
But do you know why I wanted a 10-day commission? Because I tried to look, I'm a Supreme Court litigator. I argue cases in front of the Supreme Court.
I know.
I tried to look through history and precedent, and the best precedent I could find was the election of 1876. 1876 was between Rutherford B. Hayes and Samuel Tilden. And what happened there were serious allegations of voter fraud, and Congress didn't throw its hands up and say, you know what? CNN demanded that I accept the results no matter what, so ignore the fraud. I got to go. But hold on. What did Congress do in 1876? What did Congress do in 1876?
How did the president handle it?
What did Congress do in 1876?
Senator, I have to know, you can't answer yes or no to this question.
I'm asking a question. What did Congress do in 1876?
You can't answer yes or no to this question. And Republicans,
can you answer my question? Why are you refusing to answer my question?
I'm conducting the interview with all due respect, Senator. And let me ask you, it's Republicans have twisted themselves in knots. It's just a yes or no question.
I'm not twisting myself. I'm answering your question. You just don't like my answer.
And what's your answer? Is it yes or is it no?
So in 1876, what Congress did is it appointed an election commission. It consisted of 15 people. 5 House members, 5 senators, 5 Supreme Court justices. The Election Commission was charged with studying the evidence and making a determination of what voter fraud occurred, and that determined the winner. And what I called for in 2020 was to do the same thing, appoint an election commission, and 11 senators joined me.
Senator, with all due respect, after it had been thrown out of many courts, after the Attorney General Bill Barr, because there was no basis for those court cases.
No, so that's actually
Senator,
not.
With all due respect,
you asked me a question. Do you want me to answer it?
And you didn't answer the question.
Yes, I did.
Dozens of court cases were thrown out.
Hold on a second.
The Attorney General said there was no widespread fraud. You're not clearly answering the question. I want to thank you for that.
I'm answering every question. I think the country would have been a lot better off with a determination of what evidence of voter fraud there was that occurred, and instead the media didn't want to hear it and insists voter fraud never occurs. You ought to go back and look at the Carter-Baker Commission. It was
the Attorney General, and my question was about
it was the media. It was CNN that relentlessly pushed that propaganda. And by the way, never holds.
That there was no widespread fraud in the election?
That voter fraud doesn't exist, and anyone who says it does is wearing a tinfoil hat. That is propaganda. And by the way, you never asked Hillary Clinton this. You never asked Stacey Abrams this. You never asked Al Gore this.
With all due respect,
and every
Senator,
one of them said the Republicans who won were illegitimate.
I haven't had any of them on my show. We'll talk to them. But I don't remember there being a president who was refusing to turn over the transition of power and facilitate in it.
And Trump didn't either. Joe Biden became president.
My question was about 2024. You did not answer it.
Let me say a final point for you. You said they haven't come.
Thank you very much, Senator Ted Cruz.
My opponent, Colin Allred, hasn't either. He ought to come to your show.
Senator Ted Cruz, no answer to that question. Thank you very much.